Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Tuesday Tuesday evening. Feels a little bit like afternoon to me, but not sure why I said that. But anyway, we got a great show for you guys today. We are going to talk about Julian Assange, as you just saw. That's very important. You guys have been really wanting for me to talk about that, and it is really, really important. So we're going to talk about that. That should be a great thing to actually start out with. Then, we've got the usual Trump ridiculousness. For example, he attacks Joe Biden in surprisingly what could be an effective way, even if it's complete BS. So I'm going to break that down. That's going to be fun and interesting. Then we have the Trump administration going after basic science. I mean, it really is amazing. It basically completely undermines climate change policy. Then, Meghan McCain. Oh, you're going to enjoy that one. Meghan McCain getting dragged for hypocrisy. What kind of hypocrisy? Well, we'll talk about that. And then, of course, the establishment is at it again. This time, smearing Bernie Sanders. We've got some very anti-Semitic articles that I want to share with you guys that they are attacking Bernie Sanders over, or they're using to attack Bernie Sanders, I should say. And I'm going to break it down and just going to show you how disgusting these attacks are. So a lot of interesting stuff today. Got a bit of a mix from ridiculous to incredibly serious, which would, like I said, be our first story. But before I get into that, I want to thank some patrons and some channel members. I haven't done that in a while. So I want to thank Tony Garcia, Holly Tallman, Aaron Pimentel, and Bruce Fisher. Those are our patrons. Thank you. You help support independent progressive media. If you want to support our show, patreon.com/TYTNation. Other way that you could do so is through channel memberships. Couple of new channel members, or actually a few new channel members since I last did shout-outs. We have Neutron C, Ben Matthews, Frederick Turner, Stephen Ford, Nellie Hunt, Kenneth Mann, and Madiel7. So thank you to those users on YouTube for signing up and supporting TYT Nation. Again, we would not have a show without you guys. So thank you so much. All right. That said, pouring into the stories. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend. Enjoyed the extra day of whatever you'd like to do. I kind of like spending my day thinking about how, and actually giving the proper respect to those veterans from World War II. Now, why do I say that? That's because a lot of those veterans did, I think, what we sorely need in America. And that's go after fascism and Nazis. They knew how to deal with Nazis back then. So I want to give them credit for that and for their sacrifice fighting fascism all over the world. And just to say that we actually need to, we need to continue that fight. We need to bring that fight back and to stop fascism wherever it rises. Okay. That's all for that. All right. So let's move forward. Let's get into the first story. If you haven't already, please share, like, and share the stream. All right. So we'll start out with something super important, and that's Julian Assange. Now, last week, the U.S. government, under the direction of President Donald Trump, indicted Julian Assange under the Espionage Act for what they call conspiring to leak classified documents. Now, this is according to The Intercept. The indictment focused on Assange's alleged efforts to encourage former Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning to leak classified materials to him and WikiLeaks about a decade ago. So now, to be clear, this has got nothing to do with Russia. It's got nothing to do with the 2016 election, obviously, and everything to do with things like the collateral murder tape which basically showed American forces killing unarmed Iraqis, journalists, and medical professionals in what should have been classified as a war crime, and and something where they should have actually punished the people that were involved in the shooting, in the killings. Instead, it was Chelsea Manning that was punished for leaking this to Assange and to WikiLeaks after she had attempted to first run it up the chain of command, which got basically they didn't care, and then tried to run it to other outlets before WikiLeaks had taken it on. Now remember, this whole thing, by the way, happened under the Obama administration, going after Chelsea Manning. And so this was an embarrassment of the government. So President Obama tried to go after it, but there were limits to what he was willing to do. He actually refused to target WikiLeaks and use the Espionage Act against Assange. Now, the reason that he held off is, look, here's, I basically don't want to do that because it kind of opens the door, right? We do have to consider press freedom. Now, WikiLeaks is considered a publisher of information, and therefore you can't actually go after the publisher after the press. That would be a violation of the First Amendment. Trump, however, now that we have President Trump doesn't care about press freedom. He hates the press. And then, when given a chance, he basically was able to revive the Obama investigation into WikiLeaks and is moving forward with that indictment to go after WikiLeaks and Julian Assange for basically embarrassing the Obama government. Although, of course, we know it's not really about that. It is about the hatred of the press. Now, WikiLeaks, of course, to refresh you guys, released a trove of documents, some of which were reported on by outlets like the New York Times and The Guardian, who also published some of them as well. Now, The Intercept, from which I'm citing a lot of this information, also published some of these documents. Now, they report that the Manning leaks helped reveal long-hidden truths about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and about the global war on terror, of which, look, you ask a lot of people how many countries were actually in fighting against so-called terrorism, they would be maybe say, okay, Iraq, Afghanistan, but it turns out, no, we're in Yemen, we're in parts of Africa, we're in a lot of places where we shouldn't actually be. There's no formal declarations of war, and we're just butting into other places and saying, oh, no, we're just here to fight terrorism, when that's not necessarily the case. So, now publishing that stuff, the collateral murder tape and et cetera, and not only that, but a lot of the ways that the U.S. government was found to have spied on us, that was from Edward Snowden, who was a former NSA contractor. That's important stuff, and that's really in the public interest of the American people. None of the released information revealed troop movements or anything that would actually put regular, or not just regular people, but troops in danger. So no American lives are in danger because of this. WikiLeaks and Snowden and all them made sure that the information that was released didn't actually harm American soldiers, right? What happened is basically they helped unmask what the military was actually doing in their name, and it was abhorrent. Now, were they really fighting terror by killing unarmed civilians and journalists and medical professionals in so-called double taps? No. They were, I think, in my opinion, inciting more terror. And so this is the most important foreign policy discussion in modern times, which makes the release of these documents an act of journalism that is incredibly important. And as noted journalist James Risen also pointed out in this article, quote, WikiLeaks would obtain materials from sources inside governments and other organizations and then disseminate them, either by publishing them itself or by sharing them with major news organizations. WikiLeaks had served as an intermediary between sources and reporters. Now, that is a super important role. You want to have a publisher of information that protects its sources. And so, because if you give up names of your sources, then you're not going to have any sources. And that's with the government, unfortunately, wanting to know who these sources are in order to punish them as leakers, which in reality, they're actually whistleblowers. But see, as I said before, that makes WikiLeaks a publisher, just like the New York Times, just like the Washington Post and others. And I know some of you who are watching will definitely not agree to that. Oh, no, they were helping the Russians in 2016. Look, all that aside, this is not talking about Russia. This is talking about these other really important releases from WikiLeaks that happened back, around 10 years ago. So we have to understand what we're talking about here, and we have to get frames and we have to give context here into what this is going after, because again, WikiLeaks helped, whether it be on purpose or inadvertently, Donald Trump during the 2016 election with the release of, and I think this release was important, of the emails. But nonetheless, even if it helped him, they're still going after him because they are a part of the press, and President Trump despises a free and open press. And that is the problem. The Trump administration, through its actions against Julian Assange, who was in this media ecosystem, would be considered a journalist, is attacking the First Amendment. And whether you or not you personally like Assange, it shouldn't really matter. Your opinion of Assange, my opinion of Assange as a person, doesn't really matter. As a publisher, WikiLeaks knows working in that organization should not be subject to the Espionage Act. That would basically mean that you were spying against the United States government. Now, as Ryzen also points out, the indictment is almost a textbook definition of the job a reporter covering national security at a major news organization would do. It says that Assange and WikiLeaks repeatedly sought, obtained, and disseminated information that the United States classified due to serious risk that unauthorized disclosure could harm the national security of the United States. In reality, of course, it embarrassed the government of the United States. The indictment also goes on to say that WikiLeaks' website explicitly solicited, censored, otherwise restricted, and until September 2010, classified materials. Well, yeah. The thing is that today, virtually every major news organization has a secure way to get that kind of information. So you could say, well, they solicited, censored, restricted, classified materials. Well, then you could put them in the same box as WikiLeaks and charge them with the Espionage Act. And unfortunately, that is what they want to do. Now, soliciting, again, anonymous leaks and making it easy for the sources to leak to these outlets to get that information out in the public sphere is common journalistic practice nowadays. Now they continue with the indictment. Assange personally and publicly promoted WikiLeaks to encourage those with access to protected information, including classified information, to provide it to WikiLeaks for public disclosure. Well, again, that's pretty much what everyone reporting in national security especially does. They get their sources, and they come out and they promote themselves, and they say, hey, if you've got a tip, if you've got something, if you've got, classified material that you think is in the public interest, well, then we would like to know about it so that we can look at it and we can report it. Again, if it's in the public interest, because they won't release things that will actually hurt or endanger American lives. And so they can't actually go and make that real case. Now, here's the other thing, right? And a lot of people might be wondering, but what's the difference then between what WikiLeaks does in releasing classified information and what current reporters do in national security and in other places? What's the difference? Well, it's because there are a lot of leaks that are sanctioned by the government. Oh, come on, Jeff. No. Really? Yes, the government leaks. How do you think they find out a lot of this stuff? No, the government will leak to a reporter, and then the reporter will report it. Now, the difference is that the leaks from Assange embarrassed the United States government. Whereas, of course, there are other leaks that didn't embarrass the government, but actually helped in some way. Now, why would the government want certain leaks? Well, there are plenty of reasons. It could change public opinion on certain things, politics, etc. Sometimes leaks are even used as a weapon against others that have an unfavorable opinion or don't share the establishment narrative. There are all sorts of reasons that government officials will leak to reporters and have this end up in the press. But it's never to embarrass the establishment or the government. And that is the difference. And now that the Trump administration is setting a precedent, thanks to the already set precedent from the Obama administration, who opened that door, Trump can and will use this to attack the press. I mean, he calls them the failing fake news New York Times, the enemy of the people. Can you see Trump not using leaks to punish the New York Times, to charge them with the Espionage Act, or any reporter that reports on something that's unfavorable to the administration? Remember, Donald Trump is in charge. The CIA is a great example. You have Gina Haspel. She has run CIA black sites where they torture people. What if another report like that comes out after this indictment? Or would it even come out following this indictment? If it did, you might see these reporters getting hit with the Espionage Act for publishing that information. I mean, this has an effect which could effectively chill the press. And so that's why this is a problem. That's why this is a very dangerous precedent. You do not have to like Assange to see where this is heading. And you definitely don't have to like Assange to realize that this could be a huge problem and that maybe we need to protect press freedom, even if it means protecting someone that we might not necessarily like. Okay. All right. Moving on. It's a bit of a heavy segment to start out with. So let's go to Trump. Now, on Monday, users on Twitter went after President Trump after he launched an incredibly interesting attack against Joe Biden, and one that I actually think might be kind of effective, even though it's full of hypocrisy. Now, on Twitter, Donald Trump claimed that he was the better candidate for African-American voters, which is hilarious, but because he approved of a 2018 criminal justice reform bill, while Biden helped pass the 1994 Crime Act. So now, this is pretty interesting. Now, he said, quote, "Super predator was the term associated with the 1994 crime bill that Sleepy Joe Biden was so heavily involved in passing. That was a dark period in American history, but has Sleepy Joe apologized? No." First of all, Sleepy Joe, you had so many different... But again, okay, he can't come up with anything clever because that just... He can't. He's not smart enough. But anyway, my problem here is, oh no, here we go. It's happening again. Now, what do I mean? Hillary Clinton. Look, this is an attack on Joe Biden from the left. The same thing happened with Hillary Clinton on trade. Donald Trump has found an issue where he can hit Joe Biden from the left. And to be fair, it's not exactly difficult to find an issue where you can't attack Joe Biden from the left on. But this is, of course, a Republican or so-called conservative. Now, in 2016, as I mentioned before, it was trade. Now it's criminal justice reform. Now it's African Americans. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is better on criminal justice. No, of course, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that Biden has a terrible record on criminal justice, especially as it pertains to the black community. Unfortunately, just like Hillary Clinton. So he's got that similar amount of baggage. And like Hillary Clinton, I don't think Biden can put together the Obama coalition that led him to victory not once, but twice. But Jeff, wait, you'll say. He was Obama's VP. What are you talking about? Of course he'll be great for the African American community. No. As one commentator pointed out, and I wish I could remember their name, Biden was picked to make white people more comfortable with Obama. It's true. Biden is not great. You look into his record. He has a terrible record. The African American community, as I said, Anita Hill, the crime bill, being against busing, even being somewhat pro-segregationist or something. I mean, just crazy stuff, right? Biden is a terrible pick, ton of baggage, not great. Now, that said, Trump's also horrifying, and probably even more horrifying than Joe Biden. In fact, he's been very, very openly racist most of his time. Social media, by the way, had no problems reminding him. But before I get to that, let me point out that Donald Trump had once not even allowed African Americans into his hotels. And this happened back during the Nixon administration. He was sued for unfair housing practices. Federal officials had found evidence that Trump had refused to rent to black tenants and lied to black applicants about whether apartments were available. They would fill out applications. Both a white and black person would have an identical application. The black person would end up getting denied or told, sorry, we just don't have any apartments, while the white person was immediately offered an apartment. That's super racist. You also had this amazing quote from Trump about his black accountant. Quote, "Black guys counting my money, I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes all day." I think that the guy is lazy, and it's probably not his fault, because laziness is a trait in blacks. It really is. I believe that. It's not anything they can control. That's Donald Trump. That is peak racist rhetoric right there. That is something that you would hear from David Duke. And of course, you also, along with David Duke, you have the casual anti-Semitism in there too. Not only that, you had the issue with the Central Park Five, who even after their release and exoneration, meaning they did not commit the crime, Donald Trump still took out a full-page ad to call for their execution. They're guilty anyway. They must be guilty of something. Something. So Donald Trump's got some really big open racism here. And Biden is not great as well. So, look, it's very easy to criticize both of them. And look, if you're unscrupulous and you don't actually care about truth and facts and your own hypocrisy, like Donald Trump, then he'll be more than willing to use this attack against Biden, which actually could be devastating. Nonetheless, social media did a great job pointing out the hypocrisy, as usual. Jeff Tiedrich said, "Mr. President, sir, I have a question. Have you apologized for calling the execution of 5 innocent black teenagers?" And technically, they weren't all black, but the majority of the Central Park 5 were actually black. Ryan Hill said, "Like the time you called for those black teenagers to be executed." Another one. Ryan Hill also says, "That time you spent 5 years questioning the citizenship of the first black president." So referring, of course, to the birther nonsense. Grigay says, "Thousands of kids have been stolen from their parents with no plan in place to reunite them. At least 6 kids have died in U.S. custody." And that is, of course, thanks to Donald Trump's foreign policy. Jeremy Newberger says, "I'm not so sure black people are going to be able to vote for you either. They tend to hate white nationalists." Yep. Christopher says, "Do we need to have the rundown of the crap you need to apologize for?" Might be helpful. And finally, Scott Henchinger says, "What is hypocrisy? The guy who called for the lynching of 5 black teens and still won't accept their exonerations. You urge police to use more excessive force and wants the death penalty for drug sales. lecturing anyone on criminal justice policy. But, MAGA guys will say, he pardoned an African American woman. He can't be racist. You know what? That was actually a good thing that he did. Thanks to, of course, pressure from Kim Kardashian, of all people. But one good act or two good acts do not erase a lifetime of racism, especially if you actually haven't learned from it at all. As for this attack on Biden, it's true. Biden signed that bill. He has his racist skeletons in his closet too, which says to me that he's going to be a terrible choice for the Democratic nomination. If you nominate Biden, and hear me now, quote me later, it's not going to go well. I have a good track record for these things. As I also said, Hillary Clinton would also likely lead to a Donald Trump presidency. So, okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back, read some comments, and some super chats if there are any, but mostly member comments. We'll get to more stories, including anti-science, Bernie Sanders, and Meghan McCain. So stay right here. We'll come back in a few minutes. Around the Nation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, one comment here from a member. Sarge Tech says, of Biden, Obama needed a token white guy as his running mate. Yeah, that's kind of, again, one who would make white people feel comfortable. Because, you got somebody named Barack Hussein Obama. It scared a lot of white people. So they had to make sure to, oh, no, it's okay. Here we have Joe Biden. And he's very nice and moderate, too. And so, this is a safe ticket. Don't worry. Don't worry. Changing the outside, continuity on the inside. Everything's going to be okay. I think that's what that was about. Okay. Anyway, let's go to a new report here by the New York Times about how Trump is affecting or going to affect climate policy. All right. More disastrous news as it concerns the environment under President Donald Trump. The New York Times here with a new report showing how the administration plans to aggressively roll back more Obama administration protections aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the Times explains that in the next few months, the White House will complete the rollback of the most significant federal effort to curb greenhouse gas emissions. Initiated during the Obama administration, it will expand the efforts to impose Mr. Trump's hardline views on other nations, building on his retreat from the Paris Accord and his recent refusal to sign a communique to protect the rapidly melting Arctic region unless it was stripped of any references to climate change. Because we cannot have any sort of references to climate change whatsoever. And they add, in what could be Mr. Trump's most consequential action yet, his administration will seek to undermine the very science on which climate change policy rests. So they're going after science. Well, now, why? Well, as you're going to see, it's because it's politically inconvenient. Now, Trump officials are directing many of the administration's researchers and scientists to severely restrict their modeling of climate change and global warming going forward. Instead of projecting possible climate scenarios up through 2100, the administration will cut the models off at 2040, at which point many of the extreme effects of climate change are unlikely to have been felt. So they're restricting the modeling. Now, the administration says, oh, no, it's prudent to have more short-term models so that they're more accurate. Now, look, do they have a little bit of a point? Sure. Some of those models that go out to 2100 might be off a little bit. Again, they are computer models. They can be refined. They can be fixed with new information. And it's always changing. It's always evolving. But you can still create a a basic policy prescription to deal with that, even when you're looking so far out. By cutting it down to 2040, you're actually limiting that, and therefore you're kind of limiting the scope of what kind of policies you would use to attack this problem. And so it cuts off research into the most dire impacts of climate change, which are set to happen, of course, later this century, which is yet to be felt. Now, we're already feeling climate change right now, but it's not gotten to the point of where it's disastrously calamitous yet. And it will be. Michael Oppenheimer, a Princeton professor of geosciences and international affairs, told the Times that ignoring the worst-case scenario is, quote, like designing cars without seatbelts or airbags. And without the U.S. government involved in these efforts, valuable scientific findings might be delayed or missed. Now, hopefully, only just delayed. And I love the point about cars without seatbelts or airbags. Well, there was a time where our cars did not have seatbelts or airbags. And who were the ones that were fighting the hardest against those things? Big corporations and conservatives. I mean, they fought them tooth and nail. Not only that, but these companies also fought against outlawing lead in gasoline. And so corporations, with their paid lackeys in Congress, they tried to do that. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful. They got the lead out of the gasoline. And then, of course, lead levels in people's blood ended up dropping dramatically, which reduced violence, as lead is actually linked to more violence and aggression. Now those same corporations, as I said, are trying to outlaw a part of climate science or limit climate science. As for Trump, I don't think he personally cares about science or scientific facts or anything like that. No, apparently it's about his ego. Mr. Trump, according to the article, is less an ideologue than an armchair naysayer about climate change, according to people who know him. He came into office viewing agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, or what he would call it, the Department of Environmental, as bastions of what he calls the deep state, and his contempt for their past work on the issue is an animating factor in trying to force them to abandon key aspects of their methodology that they use to try to understand the causes and consequences of a dangerously warming planet. For Mr. Trump, they add, climate change is often the subject of mockery. Yes, the planet being on fire, not literally, but figuratively, is such a great thing to mock. Wow, warming temperatures and all the devastating effects, including mass migrations. Like, you think immigration from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador is bad. Well, just wait till there are places that either are underwater, Pacific Islands, or places that can no longer grow their own food because the climate has changed. That mass migration is going to make this, the unaccompanied children, the current so-called crisis at the border, way, way worse. Now, there's more. His views are also influenced mainly by friends and donors like Carl Icahn, the New York investor who owns oil refineries, and the oil and gas billionaire Harold Hamm, both of whom pushed Mr. Trump to deregulate the energy industry. I have to note that Trump, Hamm, and Icahn are not going to be personally feeling the impacts of climate change, and not necessarily everybody who's watching will feel most of these disastrous impacts. It will be mainly poor people and generations yet to come who will feel the worst impacts. So a lot of these billionaires and a lot of these politicians say, it's not going to affect me, so why should I stop making money? And that kind of goes to show you who they are. Look, Trump himself has no intellectual curiosity and goes along with his buddies in industry, not surprising, who most certainly know that they are destroying the environment but don't care, who just back up his own innate biases against science and against factual information. Again, he's not a smart person. He laughs at the face of science and facts. So he's not going to be on the side of it. He's going to be on the side of the people that tell you, no, Donald, you're right all along. Climate change is a hoax, a Chinese hoax made up by Al Gore and the Chinese to hurt industry. Climate change is great. And so just keep deregulating and undoing everything that dastardly Obama had already done. And then you'll be great. Everything is great. Now, what's worse? Donald Trump or the CEOs at ExxonMobil and all those companies that know the truth, but just don't care about what kind of impact they're having? I think we know the answer to that. And it's not Donald Trump. He is a symptom of the disease. But the CEOs and those who are allowing this to happen while knowing the truth, they are climate nihilists. Look, they know they're old. They know they're going to die before they're affected. So, and the reason that I call them nihilists is because they're determined to take the rest of us down if it helps them make an extra dollar. And so that is the unfortunate truth about what's going on with climate policy. It's not looking good unless we change it. Okay. Moving on. Let's go after Meghan McCain. Now, Meghan McCain is once again getting in trouble for a little bit of hypocrisy, this time concerning her late father, John McCain. Now, John McCain recently went after I'm sorry. Yes, McCain actually went after Democratic Senator and 2020 contender Amy Klobuchar. Now, she tweeted this, quote, "On behalf of the entire McCain family, please be respectful to all of us and leave my father's legacy and memory out of presidential politics." Now, why would she say that? I mean, maybe Klobuchar must have said something truly awful, went after her family in some sort of way, right? I mean, it's not like Donald Trump hasn't went after the McCain family. Well, okay, we have a quote. This is from Amy Klobuchar at one of her sparsely attended rallies. She said this, quote, "The day when I sat on the stage between Bernie and John McCain kept reciting to me the names of dictators during that speech because he knew more than any of us what we were facing as a nation. He understood it. He knew because he knew this man more than any of us did." And this was during the inauguration of President Trump. No, now wait a minute. What's wrong with that? I mean, let me be clear. I don't like anybody in this story. I hate everyone here. Okay. Meghan McCain, I do not like her. Amy Klobuchar, certainly don't like her. And John McCain, also not a fan. And even I'm looking at this saying, now wait a minute. Now, what's wrong with that? I mean, if you're Meghan McCain, what would you find offensive about that statement? Now, from my perspective, Klobuchar is a moderate, right? She's a so-called moderate. She loves reaching out to Republicans like John McCain. And she has a history of invoking his name in very positive, like in a very positive way. Which drives me nuts as a progressive. To see somebody who couldn't wait to get us into a war with Iran and who voted for 100 other terrible things, voted with Trump most of the time, getting praised by a Democrat, but then again, that's Amy Klobuchar. Now, if you were looking for somebody who's more of a centrist and, enjoys Republicans and loves to work with them and getting their policies passed, well, that's Amy Klobuchar for you, right? So now, on that, what's Meghan's problem with her? I don't know. I don't see the problem. But it seems to be pretty hypocritical for Meghan McCain to slam somebody for referencing her father when that's all she does, ever. And Twitter, social media had no problem calling it out. Mike Adams says, in all honesty, this is not fair. McCain was a career politician, which is something that should not even exist. His daughter's making a living off his name. You cannot have it both ways. It's like a member of the royal family demanding both the golden crown and personal privacy. So true. Chance McMahon says, read, "Only I, the daughter of John McCain, get to use my father's legacy for my own personal gain." Excuse me. John Carvalho says, "I think under the system of protocol, presidential candidates would be limited to quoting only living politicians and fictional characters. No more Churchill, Teddy Roosevelt, Lincoln, or Kennedy." I don't know, maybe. Dennis Stern says, "Even though Meghan McCain drags her family through presidential politics most days on The View, but my dad." He added, "And gee, wonder if she'd have that job if she was not a McCain." Well, I think we all know the answer to that. Of course she would not have that job. But because she is a McCain, and because she continues to reference her father all the time, it's the only reason that she's relevant, only reason she's on TV. Because, for one, she literally has no stance. Her apparently, according to Anna Kasparian, who's worked with her before, she has a different personal preference to abortion than her public preference to abortion. So that's interesting. And basically, she's on The View in order to continue to get into fights with the progressives. But she literally knows nothing about politics and even her own side. Just there for the drums. More, Gary M. Serrell says, "You remember him running for president in 2000-2008. He's part of the history of presidential politics," which is true. He also adds, "Did you try DMing Amy Klobuchar instead of using your dad's corpse as a cudgel for presidential politics?" And 3, I bet your disappointment to your dad. Oh, those last 2. Oh, those are great. Now the work begins tweets, He's a public figure, and we have a First Amendment. Nothing disrespectful here, only your desire to always center yourself where you were irrelevant. Sherry Smulders points out, I think you use your father every single day. Such a hypocrite. And finally, David Rothschild says, what the F is this? Well, I'll tell you what this is. This is a privileged, entitled girl who knows nothing about the world, getting mad at somebody for referencing their friendship with their dad as an effort of bipartisanship, or an example of bipartisanship. The whole thing drives me nuts for my own reasons. But I think the hypocrisy is that much worse. I can't stand it. And that's why Meghan McCain is literally the worst. Okay. Moving on. One more story here. All right. Now, both Politico and The Hill have recently published pieces critical of Senator Bernie Sanders. I know, like, here's my shocked face. Now, Politico is, of course, the establishment press, and they've been writing negative articles about Bernie Sanders since 2016. Again, no surprise, right? But this time, they have ventured into anti-Semitic smears. Now, what do I mean by that? And do I have good examples? I do. Now, the latest attack from Politico came in a now deleted tweet with a picture of Bernie Sanders surrounded by houses and a money tree. And that text was, Bernie Sanders may be cheap, but he's not poor. And then there's another article, The Secret of Bernie's Millions, with him, like I said, next to the money tree with houses for ears. Now, the reason, of course, that that's problematic is that it plays on tropes. See, Senator Sanders would be the first, if he wins, the first Jewish president of the United States. So this is pretty bad. Now, it was so bad that the Anti-Defamation League had to step in. They said this, quote, in this dangerous climate of rising anti-Semitism, all media organizations have a responsibility to be careful not to perpetuate anti-Semitic tropes, such as those about Jews and wealth. Got to be careful out there, Politico. What are you doing? What are you doing? But apparently, Kristen Tate, who's a libertarian, conservative opinion contributor to The Hill, did not get that message, and she wrote her own article titled, Millions of Taxpayer Dollars Fueled Bernie Sanders to Wealth Success. Oh boy. Odd title, right? So now, look, let's be fair. Let's get into the article. Maybe it won't be that bad. Let's see. We'll read the first paragraph. She writes, Senator Bernie Sanders, the 2016 phantom of the Democratic Party, who is now in second place in the 2020 primary, seems to go out of his way to prove himself a stereotypical socialist who is happy to spend your money while saying nothing of his own. That was the first paragraph. Right into it, man. She just, dives right in. Spares no second. More. His consistent harangues against the millionaires and billionaires contrast sharply against a man that used his time in the public sector to catapult into the top 1% of the nation. Damn. Where do you start, right? Okay, for one, I don't think being worth $2 million, that's how much Bernie Sanders and his family are worth. I don't think that actually is quite enough to put you into the 1%, maybe the top 10% or 5%, but definitely not the 1% or the 0.1%, which is really what Bernie Sanders focuses on. Now, she continues. Sanders has a long history in government, including 8 years as mayor of Burlington and a combined 28 years in the House and Senate. Okay, look, that's factual information. But then adds, never one to hold down a private sector job. He is the only presidential candidate who was kicked out of a hippie commune for laziness. Again, disgusting attack. She then talked about how he's made money from all those years in public service, and somehow making that money from his salary as a public official makes him a hypocrite. He took a paycheck. He was mayor of Burlington, then a congressman, and then made a decent amount of money writing a book. Wow, it turns out that if you earn a paycheck from government service and then write a wildly successful book, you're going to have money. Wow. Holy crap, that's amazing. Congratulations for figuring out that mystery of how Bernie Sanders is now still the poorest member of Congress. So now, why is it bad for Sanders to take a paycheck, write a book, and still stay one of the poorest members of Congress, while everyone else happens to be worth a lot more? I don't know, but of course somebody will say that. Jeff, he's run against millionaires and billionaires, and now he is a millionaire and a billionaire. He's at least now a millionaire. So obviously he must be a hypocrite. Yeah, but is he advocating for cutting his own taxes now that he's there? Is he advocating for, eliminating the estate tax? Is he doing that? Is he advocating for more money in politics so that he can have more influence? Is he taking large donations from corporate donors? Is he doing any of that? No, absolutely not. No. The thing is, he actually wants more taxes on himself. And that same author goes on to say, but he didn't pay more than he's supposed to. He pays a lower tax bracket. That's because, he doesn't set the tax brackets. And he's actually trying to make a more progressive tax system. Like, it's basically you're a member of society, ha ha. But wait, I didn't set up that society. And that he's been trying to change that so that people who are wealthier, end up paying more in marginal taxes. Again, it's ridiculous smear after ridiculous smear, right? Besides, what he's running against isn't necessarily people making money. It's a system that allows for mass concentrations of wealth and power from the donor class. That's what he wants to change. Look, not everybody who has $1 million or more is a bad person. No, it really matters how you make that money, right? And for Bernie Sanders hasn't hurt anyone making that money. He hasn't cut wages. He even has a union. He pays his staffers $15 an hour. He's one of the first to do that. And so, is he stepping on people? No. Did he step on people to get wealthy? No. He helped the area of Burlington so much that he kept getting reelected. And he has helped Vermont so much that he continues to get reelected. He's incredibly popular in his home state. Gee, I wonder why. But of course, look, disgusting attack after disgusting attack. But back to the most disturbing part, as I said before. The anti-Semitic imagery of the old Jewish person taking your money and only spending 4% of it on charity. That's what's disgusting. The old tropes. And they're coming out one after another from the establishment press. And that's gross. Now, thankfully, there have been people who have come out against this. AOC, for one, she tweeted, "Can Politico explain to us how photoshopping money trees next to the only Jewish candidate for president, talking about how cheap and rich he is, isn't anti-Semitic? Or are they just letting this happen because he's a progressive politician that they don't like?" Sirota, David Sirota, who is his communications director, wrote this. So Politico deleted its wildly anti-Semitic tweet, but it's important for everyone to not forget this episode. At a moment when we have a president who called Nazis very fine people, this newspaper promoted the cheap Jew trope against the president's opponent. Disgusting. And it's true. And now that that attack has been called out for what it is, well, just today, Politico has a new attack against Bernie Sanders in an article titled "Bernie Sanders Extreme Makeover," with the subheading, quote, "A candidate with aversion to smoozing and ring kissing bows to the necessities of a top-tier presidential campaign." Now look, if you read the article itself isn't necessarily all that bad. It says that Sanders has been seeking endorsements from members of Congress and that his pitch is that he is the most electable against Donald Trump. Now, the second one is subjective. I do believe that he is the most electable, and he certainly has the poll numbers to back it up as of right now. But the framing here, if you look at it, it's Bernie Sanders courting the establishment that he hates. Hypocrite. And that's the problem here. Look, they are deeply scared of him. And that's why all these articles are coming out, because he represents real change. So this is a good example of a hit piece. Now, if you don't think that there's a smear campaign going against Bernie Sanders from the mainstream, then you're either part of it or you're not paying attention. This is how they do it. Sometimes it's gross, and sometimes it's very subtle. Now, look, if you want to criticize Bernie Sanders on policy, that's absolutely fine. Look, I've criticized him on policy before myself. However, it might be kind of hard to do now, as most Democrats have actually adopted his policies in the mainstream. But to be fair, there's some things that maybe you can still criticize him for. Anti-Semitic smears and misleading headlines are a completely other thing. And so it just all goes to show you that in this fight, the establishment is willing to fight dirty. Expect more of this, and expect it to continue to be nasty. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Appreciate it. Thank you for people who go to our Patreon page and support us that way. Thank you to the channel members as well. Thank you to everybody who likes and shares this stream. Please like and share our videos when you see them get released. All right, guys. Thank you all. Love you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you tomorrow.